May the words of my mouth, the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, God, our Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen. Please be seated. Follow me, and I will make you fish for people. And the greatest surprise of the whole story, for me at least, is that they say yes and they follow him. It's astonishing. It seems so easy for Jesus to say, and he gets a positive response. Follow me and I will make you fish for people. No thanks would be my response. I've tried fishing. I've tried fishing many times, mainly for the sake of my father, and it is jolly boring. And that's just fishing for fish. And I can't leave everything that I've got going on. Surely there's too many things that are important. I think the temptation is to see a very different context in this reading, to think, oh, well, it must have been different for them. It must have been easy for them in a way that it's not for us. We've got so many things in our lives that are bearing down on us, responsibilities, duties. Maybe they were young and free and they could just take off like this. Maybe they knew that Jesus was this powerful leader, that he was going to revolutionize the world. Maybe they knew that their futures would be secure with him. Well, if they did think that, they were wrong in some ways. Their futures were not terribly secure. And I don't think they did anyway. At the start of the reading, Jesus turns up to this new place. He leaves Nazareth, where he's been living, and he goes and makes his home in Capernaum. And has words of his deeds travelled this far, this quickly before him? Well, possibly, but there aren't very many deeds really to travel. He's had his baptism so far, he's had his birth, and he's had his temptation on his own, alone in the wilderness. They really are taking a bit of a gamble here. And they've got plenty of things to be worried about. This is a first century Palestine. This is a society in which family links are incredibly important, where they were working in the same business as their father, where they would have been expected to help in the household until they were married and built their own. And yet they capture something of the spontaneity that I think we're so keen to grip hold of today when we feel like we're trapped in lives that we can't get out of. It's the same thing that Hollywood sells movies and TV shows with the actress. I'm not sure if you come across the actress Zooey Deschanel. Everything that she's ever cast in, she's this sort of spontaneous, kooky, paints her face green, goes and flies a kite up in the park, and then in the evening with the sunset drinks a beer with a man she's just met that she's fallen deeply in love with. And that's the kind of image that is gripping our media and that we're all yearning for, this ability to free ourselves, to let things go, to just be spontaneous. Well, Hollywood, look no further than this story. If you want spontaneity, you only have to look at the sons of Zebedee, who, while in the process of mending the net with their father, are offered this chance. Come and follow me and I will make you fish for people. And they think, well, it's got to be better than mending nets, right? And off they go. I kind of wonder when I hear this story whether Jesus didn't turn up by the lake and see hundreds of fishing boats and hundreds of fishermen and think, well, maybe here is an opportunity for me to collect some disciples. And he was probably rather pleased with himself when he came up with this clever wordplay. And he would walk up to the fishermen and say, come and follow me, and I will make you fish for people. And I imagine him going up to the first boat, and the fishermen looking at him and saying, we fish for fish. What are you talking about? We've got nets to mend. The tide's coming in. Come on, off you go. And he goes up to the second boat and the third. Come and follow me, and I'll make you fish for people. And it's running thinner and thinner, this pun of his, and eventually he receives, after his persistence, this reward of his disciples. And it's a confusing metaphor, actually, this one about fishing for people. It's, on the surface, I think we can probably agree, meant to be evangelistic, But if that's what it is meant to be, it's quite savage. This is my experience of fishing. You have a lure, or you have a hook that you put bait on, and you cast it out into the sea, and you hope that a fish bites it, and if it does, you give your line a yank so that you can set the hook properly in its mouth, and then you wind it in, and then you let it run out again, and you wind it in to tire it, and you let it run out, and you wind it in to tire it, and eventually you pull it out of the water, at which point you chop its head off, and you cook it and eat it. That's a strange metaphor to use for evangelism, I think. It sounds more like the evangelism that the devil might take part in. Hooking people, using false lures to bring people in, tiring them out, and eventually killing and eating them. Well, maybe the killing is kind of appropriate in one way. Maybe that's meant to be a look to the future, where at the end of Matthew's Gospel, Christ commands his disciples to baptize people. Maybe killing is meant to be, the death is meant to be about death to our old ways and rising to new life through the waters of baptism. Maybe, but there hasn't been a lot of new life for most of the fish that I've caught. It's just death and getting eaten. And the metaphor isn't just confusing in that respect. It's confusing because it depends on the kind of fishing that we're thinking about as to how we interpret it. What I've mentioned is fishing with a rod and a line and a hook. And on that basis, it would be about what we would call relational evangelism, I suppose. It would be about engaging with one person over a period of time, slowly reeling them in, engaging in one-to-one contact. And on the other hand, the fishing that these people were probably taking part in was with nets. That's what we hear them mending and hear them throwing out into the lake. And I guess that would be the sort of rallies of the 60s and 70s that we saw, these great grand acts of putting all our strength and effort into one big display and hoping to reap a whole net full of fish as a result. So it's a confusing metaphor on the basis of its savagery. It's a confusing metaphor on the basis of what kind of fishing we're getting involved in. And on top of that, there's this question about whether, if Christ came to us, he would say, "Come and follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Is fishing for people just for fishermen? If he came to teach us, would he say, "You're a teacher, come and teach for me"? If he came to a business person, would he say, "Come and be busy for me"? Well, on the one hand, that seems quite an attractive model because it takes into account this idea of the uniqueness of our gifts, the talents that we've been given, and using them in the service of Christ. To the contrary, there's this imagery of the water. You'll remember in the creation account, before anything can be created, before any life can be created, first the waters have to be driven back to allow the land to arise. And that's a common theme in the ancient Babylonian creation myths from which our creation myth is derived. And in those myths, the gods who are doing the creating, there's lots of gods in the Babylonian myths, they first have to subdue the monsters of the sea, the leviathans, these evil, cruel, chaotic forces. And that's the way that water is viewed for a long time, for its dangerous, chaotic, and evil purposes. You only have to look at the story of Noah, where water kills all but eight of the people on the face of the land. Or look at Jonah. Jonah's own death and resurrection comes in the belly of a fish underneath the great expanse of the water. The water is a treacherous place. It's chaotic. So maybe fishing is appropriate for everyone. Maybe what we're doing when we fish people out is that we're drawing them out of that chaos. We're bringing them out of the depths, away from that evilness that had to be driven away by God before anything good could be created, into his light, into his realm. Well, we might not be able to agree on an interpretation of fishermen, But what about follow me? Well, Matthew offers the following words from Jesus' mouth at the end, or towards the end of his gospel. He has Jesus tell his disciples, if you want to become one of my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. If you want to become one of my followers, then follow me. And all that goes to prove, I think, really, is that God and Matthew have a good sense of humour. Not terribly much explanation in that either, I'm afraid. And to draw that all out is probably the topic of another sermon. So I leave you with this rather nebulous advice, these words from Scriptures. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow Christ. Amen.